You need to build the ability to to tolerate much more complexity. And some of the practices in different traditions help with that. Being able to sit with pain, suffering, and with joy and beauty at the same time. To sit with knowing and not knowing at the same time. To sit with this sense that I am an individual and I'm here and separate from the universe and everything else, while at the same time we have plenty of evidence of how other people and trees and sun and water and temperature are influencing me. So what appears as separate, and then if we delve and dive in, we know we're not.
Welcome to a Curious Yogi podcast. I'm your host, Bobby, joined by living masters and awakening friends. We're here to illuminate your practice as we explore what it means to walk the yogi's path, unfold peace from within, and live the vision of oneness. I'm so delighted you're here. Now let's get curious. Welcome back to a Curious Yogi podcast, dear listeners, where today practice, lived experience are met with science and, of course, curiosity. Today, I'm joined by Philippe Goldin, PhD, a professor at the University of California, Davis, and director of the Clinically Applied Affective Neuroscience Laboratory. Today's conversation is a real privilege. And let me tell you, it was a total mind bend for me. Philippe's brilliance, his intellect, his science background is enough to make anyone's brain do somersaults. But in the most delightful and humble way. He has such a great way of explaining and breaking things down into language which we can all get. So for any skeptics out there who deny the great mysticism behind life's mysteries, well, prepare yourself. And my burning question to Philippe: what is consciousness? And then when we wander into dark matter territory, you'll probably see me throw in that little mind blown emoji. Philippe's work sits at a rare and powerful intersection where neuroscience meets mindfulness, compassion, and real world healing. I love hearing Philippe's backstory because he met his Swedish wife in India. And if you've been listening to this podcast for some time, you know that I met my Swedish, not quite husband, but my Swedish guy in India also. But his journey is totally remarkable. Philippe speaks Tibetan fluently and has an extraordinary perspective on living and studying Tibetan Buddhism across India, Nepal, and Tibet itself, often acting as a translator and aid for many highly honored lamas. Ultimately, this is interesting, he made the choice to keep the monastery in his heart, as advised by one wise monk, and move into academia. And today, it truly seems that he is a bridge between the worlds. So we had the honor of hearing him speak at the University of Malmo. They had a mindfulness day, and I'm so honored. It's such a joy to have him here on the show. Philippe brings a rare combination of a brilliant scientific mind, a deep meditation and contemplation practice, and a lived understanding of the human emotion and resilience. He really demonstrates the magic of science, psychology, and spirituality, and what is possible for the future. With over 120 peer-reviewed publications and groundbreaking programs like Stanford's Compassion Cultivation Training and Google's Search Inside Yourself program, Philip has explored how the brain regulates emotion, how therapy changes the brain, and how mindfulness and compassion practices ripple through workplaces, communities, and even climate resilience efforts. Wow. And today we touch on so much intentionality and relationality. Yes, science shows us we're all connected and our intention matters. How science and spirituality can inform each other, and how ethics and approaching the unseen can guide our practice and our lives. So, before we dive in, a quick reminder: if you love this show, if you get value from this show, please support us, me, the show on Patreon at patreon.com/a curious yogi podcast. Plus, I've got 2 meditation courses and a special yogasana series for experienced practitioners, all coming up in January. So head over to the Patreon page or my website to find all the things. So take a breath, speaking to myself. Take a breath, settle in, and join me in welcoming Philippe Goldin to a Curious Yogi podcast. Okay, so let's do it. All right, Philippe, welcome to a Curious Yogi podcast. Such an honor to have you here with me today.
Thank you for.
Yeah, it's a real, I feel, honor. Like I was just saying before we started recording, you have such an impressive bio, and you're up to so many wonderful things. And I really can't wait for you to share your knowledge, your wisdom with the listeners who just love all things meditation. But also know that you have an interesting sort of backstory. So I'd love if you could just pull us back a little bit to how you got to here and now in the Coles Notes version of a PhD professor of tell us everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Take us back.
Yes, going back. Well, I was born in Manhattan, in New York City, right, to an Argentine mama who is a modern dancer who immigrated to New York City as to follow her passion, dancing. And then my father, who was a physicist, PhD level physicist, and also a master's trained artist. So he
Wow.
really straddled art and science, and my parents were very bohemian, and we grew up in West Village, New York City, Manhattan, and I was fortunately to be exposed to many things and many different music, ideas, culture, etc. But one of the things that really linked uh, me to India and Nepal was that at the age of 50, my mom said, "Okay, I need a break. I'm taking off." And she went alone to India and Nepal with a little backpack and was there for 5 months, traveling, meeting, experiencing. And when she returned, she was very clear. She said, "Philippe, you have to go." And subsequently told me that when she was there, specifically in Nepal, had a vision of me being there, right there on the street. So she strongly felt that it was important for me to experience. So I was in college or university education at the time, and I was going to go to Mexico for my third year of university to study Spanish, but then I saw a poster, study abroad through the University of Wisconsin in Nepal. And I quickly contacted them, and maybe a week and a half later, I was in Madison, Wisconsin, and I started studying Nepali language and learning about Nepal. 10 weeks, and then they shipped me to Nepal and then dropped me off with a Nepalese family that spoke no English. And I lived with them, and there was a small group of us, and we studied about Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Nepalese history, Nepali language. And I at at that moment, I actually had a chance to connect with the Tibetan Buddhist meditation center in Kathmandu. And before that, my mom had always talked about, her experience of different energies and spirituality. And so she primed the pump, so to speak. And I began doing meditation in the Tibetan tradition and spending time in monasteries. And then quickly got interested in learning Tibetan language and then Sanskrit. And I ended up spending a second year in Nepal doing exactly that, doing retreats, going deeper, writing a thesis about Tibetan Buddhist overtone chanting that's used in certain tantric rituals as part of a meditation practice where you sing to the dakinis. these female spirits or entities that represent the enlightened mind. And I really was smitten. I really felt more and more connected and curious. And for me, one of the key things was like I grew up in New York City and, identify clearly as male. But when I got there, I started looking at the tankas, the Tibetan scrolls that are paintings, and what the visualization or manifestation of the enlightened mind is androgynous.
Hmm.
And I'd never really that even that notion had never crossed my mind, this integration of male and female energies, aspects, wisdom and compassion, and even the physical forms and earrings and jewelry and body. And that was quite amazing to me. I was really surprised. And then when I spent time with Tibetan Lamas, I realized also there's a completely different model of masculinity.
Hmm.
And that was really interesting to me as well. And then doing retreats there, I got more into studying Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and practice. So anyway, I ended up coming back to the United States, finished my undergraduate degree in Asian studies, and then I worked for Tibet House in New York City. And during that time, I was coming home. I met this one monk on the subway in New York City named Lobsang Samten. And I started speaking Tibetan to him, and he was quite surprised. And so I ended up spending a lot of time working with him with an arts foundation on the Kala Chakra meditation and ritual process, which incorporates dance, music, meditation practices, sand mandalas. And Lobsang was an expert in all of that. And I was his interpreter. And so we did this huge project together about the whole Kala Chakra ritual process that became a book. I ended up having the opportunity to go to Tibet with one of my professors, who was a Tibetan Buddhist monk himself. Literally, just he and me, and I was his attendant helper because spoke Tibetan, and for some reason, we had karmic connection, and I ended up spending time both together with him and his teacher, who lived in Lhasa, the capital, and also in the Potala Palace. And I also spent time alone traveling around Tibet, which was also amazing. And then I ended up going back to India and spending time at the Namgyal Monastery in the mountains, in the Himalayas. And my mother and I went together. We thought we'd go just for the New Year's full moon teachings, and I ended up staying 4 years and living in the monastery. These things happen, and I studied Tibetan language, more retreats, Buddhist philosophy. I started doing both public and private interpreting for teachings, for different lamas, different traditions within the Tibetan tradition. So I really had a chance, especially as an interpreter or translator, to go to experience things in private that maybe other people have not when you work really, really closely one on one with a teacher. And then I really was at a crossroads thinking, should I become a monk? Should I go back to the United States? My mother was incredibly supportive either way. And then one Tibetan Lama said to me that really touched me. He said, I asked him if should I become a monk, and he said, well, if you can encapsulate the monastery in your heart, then you have the monastery with you wherever you go.
Hmm.
So if you can figure that out, then it is not necessary to become a monk. You can carry that with you everywhere. That was a very important teaching. There were many such teachings along the way. But I ended up meeting a woman named Viveka, who would then become my wife from Sweden. And I left India after working on a film, actually, in Mustang, this part in area that was actually closed to Westerners. I worked with a film company, and I worked with a Tibetan Lama who asked me to be his interpreter on that trip. And shortly thereafter, then that was enough. And then I realized I moved to Sweden to be with Viveka, the woman who had become my wife. Lasted one winter there, came back to the United States and thought, what am I doing with my life? What can I do with my life? And I settled on doing a PhD in clinical psychology. So from the very beginning of my graduate studies, I did both clinical psychology, training as a therapist, experimental psychology, doing scientific studies, and neuroscience, and specifically cognitive affective neuroscience. And that really propelled my studies, my integration of things that I really loved in science. And when I got to Stanford University psychology department, that's when I added in my love of physics, brain imaging, clinical trials, treating people who are suffering from depression, anxiety, looking at emotion regulation, attention regulation, positive and negative views of the self, both behaviorally and in the brain. And I ended up spending, I think, 11 years at Stanford doing amazing research until I moved to the University of California, Davis, as a professor, where I still am now, another 11 years doing research. But along the way, I got involved with Google, helping them develop a program they called Search Inside Yourself, a mindfulness based emotional intelligence program that is super popular at both within Google and also outside of Google. I also helped develop compassion cultivation training, which is a whole compassion, like an 8-week compassion training that we ended up doing research on, and then now got involved in creating a contemplative based climate resilience program that we actually are offering to all the students across all 10 University of California campuses and doing research on that at the moment. And along the way, really continually trying to figure out how to integrate both yoga and meditation in this continuum of using the body to train the breath, to train the mind, to awaken. And that's theme across the entire, yeah, I would say the entire lifespan. Yeah.
Hmm. Wow, such an extraordinary and interesting path that you've been on, which is like everybody's path is so unique. But I think it's
Yes.
so fascinating how you were on the like precipice of being a monk, and then here you are as like a professor at, and I'm so interested like in your research and all the knowledge that you have as someone that's clearly has an expanded intellect as well as an expanded spiritual practice, say than like the regular person. Like where are the threads that, I think because
Mm.
it's so one or the other, like psychology or spirituality, but how have you seen like both within your research and your own practice that they are together, or are they?
Yeah, I think they are. A lot depends on the intentionality. But yeah, I do think I've been able to integrate my love of science, the brain, even physics, even some of the math that's behind some of the tools that we use for brain imaging are amazing. And then all of it is integrated into, supports and trying to understand spirituality. Or awakening really is where it's at. Awakening, becoming like, how does this mind work? What is this is the ultimate research laboratory, this mind, body, brain, heart. And we have this laboratory with us all the time. And
Hmm.
it's free. You don't have to write a grant. And it's probably the most important research that any of us can actually do is like, what are the sources of my suffering, my confusion, my ignorance? What are the sources of my liberation, my understanding, my penetrating through habits, habitual tendencies? What does it mean to really drop into beauty, joy, awe in nature and in relationship to others and in the mundane? A cup of coffee, the taste of, something, a beautiful dessert.
Hmm.
So the science has continuously helped and keep me inspired to continually look for other ways of modeling, framing, understanding these core, questions about the mind, the spirit. That what, like, how do we, well, how does meditation really touch parts of the body and the brain and the notion of self to challenge us to think more and more deeply and
Hmm.
integrated these ancient texts and ancient practices into the present. It
Hmm.
helps me. It helps me.
Yeah. When you use the word like awakening,
Yes.
when we talk about awakening, is it the awakening of the mind or the awakening of the consciousness which the mind is a part of?
The latter, awakening into, yeah. So we just submitted 2 grants a couple of days ago, and it was to a consciousness foundation, and they actually asked us to write a definition of awakening, and I
Perfect.
yeah, So I can see if I can pull that up. But in essence, awakening, of course, we have this notion of this individual mind. And conventionally, that's very important and functional. And it helps us get out of bed in the morning. It helps us do what we have to do. And we use language to try to encapsulate what we're thinking, feeling, and share that with others. And at the same time, we can raise it as a question. We currently don't have an explanation for what consciousness is or how it functions in the brain or body. There's even questions about whether um, how one consciousness is influencing another, two people's minds and brains. And we do have some new tools or new methods, something called hyperscanning, to be able to look at how your brain is influencing neural patterns in my brain right this moment by the way that we listen, communicate, speak. And then even further, there's a question: are we sitting in other levels of, for lack of a better word, awareness or consciousness that exist and maybe have existed well before this lifetime that are influencing how I relate to and experience my own consciousness. So, for
Mm.
example, if you look at all the matter in the universe, only 5% are visible. So the
Oh.
vast majority of all matter in the universe is dark matter and dark energy, which makes up well more than 90%, which we have no idea what it does, how it functions, but we're bathing in it. We are in an ocean of dark matter, dark energy. And some physicists have actually suggested that maybe there's a substrata of consciousness that is based in these other forms of matter that we don't even know what they are, how to describe them, but we know they exist, that make up the vast majority of everything. And we, little human beings, with our limited eyes and constraint in what we actually can see and think and feel, are actually being touched and influenced by this all the time, unaware. So this opens up huge questions about what is my awareness, my thought, my consciousness. How much am I caught up in, from a clinical perspective, right? How much am I caught up in thinking that everything I feel in my body, sensations, think with my mind, speak with my mouth, conceive or feel or imagine is mine? We know that much of that is actually shared across people to a much larger degree than we even can admit right now. Most of us. We think it's my thought, my idea. Maybe, maybe not. And even further, there's vast amounts of other material and energies that we're sitting in that we do not know how they influence us.
Hmm.
So this can be seen as like a conundrum, or it can also be seen as like, wow, an opportunity. So I don't have to be so caught up in what I think, feel, imagine as really being me. Maybe I'm part of something much bigger. Now, from a scientific perspective, we have different tools and different clues. So we have something called hyperscanning, which is two people hooked up with EEG simultaneously, and you can really begin to see how neural patterns, that there's a psychological attunement, there's neural synchrony across the two brains, and there's some degree of aligning of oscillations of neural patterns that can be measured through dual EEG. This we actually can see now. This already is kind of blasting our notions of, well, what does individuality mean if your brain is influencing my brain pattern? The way
Hmm.
you speak and think is influencing my heart rate, my amygdala, my emotional profile. Just talking about two people. We actually have evidence for this right now. This is no longer like in question. So we are the current scientific tools, and they're always evolving, and methods and
Hmm.
conceptualizations are already saying we are much more interdependent and interinfluential. Interpersonal neurobiology and this notion of individuality is being questioned a lot when, in fact, the individual exists in dependence upon and in a influential mutual influence with many, many others all the time.
Hmm.
You think about a teacher and a student. The teacher's mind brain is influencing the students, literally. And we can actually measure that. Now, a teacher can use that in understanding to either manipulate or harm a student, or to really scaffold and facilitate that person's mind expanding, training, studying, in the same way that a parent and a child, a psychotherapist and a patient, a medical doctor and a patient, a teacher at school and a student. There's a interpersonal neurobiological basis for all of this relational stuff that is exploding right now. But it also means we need to take much more responsibility for how we influence and interact with others. So
Hmm.
hence ethics, moral behavior, ethics, intentionality. It's not just enough to meditate for my own benefit, for my own mental clarity. That's great. And what about the others? Values, ethical conduct, intentional relating. And so that's some of the critique in the West, right? If you think about mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I have studied, it's mostly self-focused. It's not really, depends who teaches it, but it's really not compassion, interpersonal or relational to the other. And this is what's exploded in clinics, in the workplace, in business, in Google is, refine my own attentional capacities and how can I improve myself? That's great. And then you have compassion practices that challenge one to really relate to the other, right? Relational. But what does that mean? How do you really do that? How do you sustain that? Is it superficial or is it deep? And then, we can go further and suggest that really you need to understand shunyata, or translated sometimes as emptiness, understand, how things actually work to be at the deepest level, to be able to support a deeper level of compassion, not just a superficial one.
Hmm.
That's a whole other topic that I've been thinking about a lot lately. Superficial versus much deeper, sustainable compassion for others based
Hmm.
on an understanding of the nature of reality.
Wow.
That's a
That
lot.
was
But anyway, it's
that
a
was
lot.
so much, but it was so I'm like following, but my mind is getting stretched at the same time in like the
Good.
most interesting way because I find it so interesting because it's like this intersect of science, psychology, awakening awareness, like this
Yes.
like and like is there a point when like the crossover, because it seems like there's a crossover happening, but is there a point that science can't reach or the spiritual expression or teachings can't
Yeah.
reach, like where does that point happen? Because it's like how far.
I mean, science is limited by both the tools that we have available, which changes over time, right? We have brain imaging tools that allow us to go beyond the scalp and go beyond the skull and allow the brain to speak for itself, if I can use that kind of metaphor. You know, you- 50 years ago, we didn't have that, or 100 years ago. We also have, so there's tools that are continually being developed. That's one. Also, a conceptual, like right now, we do not really have a clear theory about how the brain works, or even about how the mind works per se. And that's where different traditions, where they've had yogis for thousands of years trying to delve deeply into understanding how the mind works, can really help inform us. So science is limited, both theoretically or conceptually, and also engineering or mechanically by the tools we have. But I do feel like more and more scientists are much more open
Hmm.
to the idea of not just reducing or reductionism, which often is done because it's a simplification, right? And so it's understandable, but the reality behind that simplification is way more complex. So it means that we need to build the ability to to tolerate much more complexity.
Hmm.
And some of the practices in different traditions help with that. Being able to
Hmm.
sit with pain, suffering, and with joy and beauty at the same time. To sit with knowing and not knowing at the same time. To sit with this sense that I am an individual and I'm here and separate from the universe and everything else, while at the same time we have plenty of evidence of how other people and trees and sun and water and temperature are influencing me. So what appears as separate, and then if we delve and dive in, we know we're not. So even
Hmm.
this body, one body here, is holding not only trillions of cells that are working together as one to keep Philippe alive, but also billions of bacteria and other little living organisms on the surface of my skin, inside the gut, inside my body, to do all kinds of functions. So I am a living island of billions of little creatures that I am holding and feeding them and being benefited by them every moment. So then what is Philippe when in the face of that reality? Like, oh my gosh. So again, like I appear as one solid unit.
Hmm.
But we know that the way it appears is not the way it actually exists.
So,
Science
like,
can help with that.
yeah, that's my kind of question. Like,
Science
we
can help with
hold
that.
hold this paradox as like the human being, and like you're saying, these opposing thing. Like, I have a sense I am separate, and yet I have a sense there's something greater. And I'm wondering, is it like, does the research show or the science show that like the individual is located and connected to this person that's alive, but is the consciousness, the awareness of the working of the mind, like, local to this? Like, can we see that like the consciousness has, like, the when you say we don't understand how the brain works, but is the consciousness a part of the brain? And is it happening in this body, or is it happening if we are connected right now, our brains are talking to each other, then is it also outside of this physical body, separate?
Yeah. Good
And the
questions.
science, like,
These are good questions. Well, let me ask, when you close your eyes and you go to sleep and you're dreaming, where is that consciousness? Is it in this body? Is it connecting with things in the past, the future, or elsewhere in the present? That's pretty amazing. Is the consciousness or awareness only the brain? No, because we know that we have kids who are born with half a brain and they still have full awareness consciousness. So it doesn't suggest that one-to-one mapping of different psychological abilities and brain matter. You can have an injury or a stroke and lose part of your brain, but you can recover those functions even without that physical material, which goes back to neuroplasticity. The brain is a neuroplastic, sponge-like organ that continually can adapt and shift and change to help you survive, but it's not a one-to-one mapping for any kind of consciousness, right? We don't really know from a neurobiological perspective. There's some theories about reverberating or oscillating large-scale brain networks that might be related to certain aspects of consciousness, but we don't have an explanation for that. Also, it's might be, a mistaken conception to think that consciousness is constrained to just this physical barrier, right? And that's why this dual EEG brain scanning when people are interacting is so interesting because we know, be it verbal or even non-verbally, brain A is influencing brain B. The mind of person A is influencing person B. So, very interesting experiment that was published a number of years ago. Two people sitting in a room. Both of them are like looking at magazines. So under the first condition, they're not interacting, they're not talking, they're just sitting there. And they're set up with heart rate, measures of heart rate, skin conductance, breathing rate. And then a signal goes to person B to start meditating on compassion or loving kindness or compassion for the other person. Lo and behold, the other person who's sitting there just looking at a magazine, their physiology, their psychophysiology begins to change.
hmm,
That's fascinating, but then it should generate a question like, well, what is the mechanism? How is it that a person A can be influenced by person B sitting just a few feet away? How is it that sitting with a yogi or a teacher students experience physiology, parasympathetic nervous system, or or autonomic nervous system tone is modified by just being in the presence of another person who is possibly further developed. There are many, many clues that both from the spiritual practices, from people's direct experience, and even from science, that maybe our notion of where the realm of influence of our consciousness and our awareness, how far that extends, maybe is much further than just thinking it stops at the skin
Hmm.
or stops at the brain or is only in one small functional brain network. I think there's more and more evidence that we need to consider other possibilities.
Hmm. And it's so interesting, like considering possibilities and it's sort of like stretching the mind's belief of what's possible. Like when you were speaking, I was thinking about this podcast. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called the Telepathy Tapes.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh. And these autistic children that have no barrier with where their awareness can go. It's so fascinating from like a science sort of like understanding it, like how does this make sense, but on a sort of deeper, expansive level, like what is possible? Like we sort of reach a preface as like what's possible, then it's like what more could be possible.
Yeah. I mean, well, just to take empathy, for example. So take something that's a little bit easier to grasp, which is look at all the full range of individual differences in people's empathic resonance, ability to experience empathic resonance with another human being. There are some people who are so shut down, suppressed, repressed, who really, we could say, lacks at least demonstrably empathy for others. Then you can go, there's individual differences, and there's a huge range to people who, we've met, who immediately you feel like their empathic energy, their empathic concern, their ability to have empathic resonance with you. So that's a huge range of honest individual differences. So similarly, you could imagine, right? We are more than 8 billion human beings at the moment on Mother Earth. There must be a range in how should we call it? Um, abilities to refine and make very sensitive different aspects of conscious awareness, right? To see things that maybe other people don't see, to respond to color, shape, form, or energies that maybe other people don't see. So there have to be a wide range of sensitivities in human beings to be able to feel different signals in others,
Hmm. Hmm.
to be able to respond, or even to be able to love and have compassion. And that's where it goes back, in the beginning of this conversation to the, ethics and intentionality. Because that sensitivity and enhanced or refined skills can be used for good or for bad, to hurt or to harm, to help or scaffold, depending on the intentionality, the
Hmm.
motivation, which that's one thing I keep thinking, I hope that's continually refined in meditation centers and also just in learning, right? Our Western notion of learning is I have to get through this learning and, just enough and learn some skills so I can get a job, so I can make money, so I can beat out other people, so I can be important. That's often the intention as opposed to
Hmm.
how can I serve? How can I dissolve? How can I uplift all, the common denominator, not just me, which is a different intention.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like even when you first said that about that we're affected relationally, I thought like someone could affect me and how that's the sort of default way that the mind works, but actually if we start to all shift our intention in that I am affecting others or my that the relation is going out for me, it's not just what's coming into me, I have to keep myself here, but actually having that awareness that what we are putting out and how we're putting it out is going to affect the world around us. And then it kind of changes how one actually steps out and into the world.
Yes. When imagine, I know you teach yoga and meditation, and imagine, beginning, how I walk into a room and hear 20 yogi and yoginis. And my intention is, can I give them a sequence of asanas? Can I bring them to an experience of their breath? Can I bring them to an experience of their mind so these beings can become to move along the path to awakening, to freedom, so that they then can reverberate that when they leave this studio, when they meet other people. Like what I am part of this massive movement of mind opening, mind heart opening.
I love that. Great example. And I think that the listeners will also dig that too. And I just want to go back to something that you said that it's totally blew my mind about the dark matter. Do
Yes.
you think, okay, that's totally crazy to me that what you said
Dark
that, oh, we
matter
could,
and dark energy, more than 90% of all the matter that exists in the universe, including right here, right in the palm of my hand. I can't see it. It's here right now, influencing us.
but it's influencing us how?
Whoa, boy, do we want to know that.
I know
I
we
mean,
do
I
have
mean,
all day, but like,
whoa. I mean, dark energy and dark matter. I mean, we don't really know. Scientists say we know it's there, and because we infer its existence, we know that what we can see, the way things are structured, by necessity have to have something, a structure that exists out in the universe that we can't see. So that the fact
mm,
that it's there, that's completely clear. What it does, how it influences us, we don't know. Does the dark matter have very different properties than the matter that we can see, right?
mm,
Helium, hydrogen, lithium, carbon, all these things. There might be a whole other realm of material science, of materials that are made by dark matter that have all kinds of other properties, perhaps even including conscious stuff that we have no idea. But we know it exists. We're sitting in it. We exist because of it. Early in
mm,
the expansion of this particular universe, creating the infrastructure for um, gases to enter, cool off, create atoms, create helium, hydrogen, that then eventually create planets, that create water, that create our conditions for human beings to be alive. Like we are
wow.
completely interdependent in all of that.
Somehow I'm like, do you think like the ancient Tibetan yogis like tuned into like that shunyata that you were talking about, like the emptiness has like they already kind of had a clue about this dark matter? Like, is it, do you think somehow they're like, I don't know, I just feel like there's some threads, like there must be some enlightened being that was tuned into this unseen, all knowing space.
Uh, it's likely that the answer to that is yes. How that's conceptualized is really interesting. This is to that help people experience experience awareness that's independent from physical body, meaning breath and heartbeat. There are practices for that, like, death meditation practices while you're living to prepare the mind to do death practices at the moment of death. And then even being able to experience connection to things that are far broader than oneself. So they even like in the pre-Buddhist, like in the jhanas, the jhana practices, the 8 form and followed by I'm sorry, the 4 form and the 4 formless. Those are ways of stabilizing the mind to then have a glimpse into expansive experiences, right? So I would say even pre-Buddhist, there were plenty of yogis who were making contact, not only on a conceptual level, but probably on an experiential level with that level of boundarylessness,
Mm,
energy, expansiveness. Then, of course, the next question is, how do you then harness that? How does that become a tool, an experience, an understanding that helps one move through life, navigate through life in ways that support love and compassion and deep connection with others. That's not just for yourself.
Yeah, that is the question. So what's the answer?
We need teachers. We need people, we need teachers and mentors continually who keep pointing the way, who keep using different analogies, experiences, artistic experiences. I remember sitting with one Tibetan Lama when I was in Dharamsala, a Nyingma Lama, and I was the interpreter, and it was one student, and he had us sit on his bed, come to his house, sit on his bed, look out the window, look at the mountain across the valley before the sun rose. And as the sun began to just appear over the edge, to crest over the edge of the mountains, Himalayas, in that moment, he prepared us before that moment to say, that when that first light happens, pay attention to what you see and what you experience.
Wow.
We need to continuously be creative in how we bring people into direct experience and different kinds of experience. And, as even in the yoga, right, studio, same exact, the same sequence of asanas and positions of holding the body, but with a different teacher, the experience is different.
Hmm.
Why? What is it that the teacher is bringing and manifesting in the room that influences the 20 people in the room doing the same exact asanas? So there's something there about the relational, the interconnected, interpersonal presence, and the creativity of the teacher to bring something, often
Hmm.
nonverbal, into the room that touches every single person there.
Yeah, like what you said about intentionality, how that is the sort of can be the stone in the ripple out in the pond because without that starting with the right intent, it
Yes.
can kind of go haywire.
Yeah. And then from the side of the student, if I really consistently have a sense of your intention, intentionality and the reliability of your presence, then when I show up in the studio to study with you, I feel safe. I feel that you're trustworthy. I feel like I can let go of a lot of conscious or even non-conscious defenses to really experience the yoga in my body, mind, breath in ways that I would not be able to do if I didn't really, really that deep trust in you. Yeah.
Wow, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I feel like I have so many more questions, but I'll save them for next
Me
time you're in
too.
Malmo.
Me too.
Well,
My
that
God.
actually that's
Thank
because
goodness we have questions.
yes. And actually, I end the podcast with these last couple questions. And the first one is at this point in your practice in your life, what are you still curious about?
Ooh, so much. Oh my goodness. Like how, like even like looking at the sky, like which I'm doing right this moment, looking at the sky, looking at the natural green shades of the tree, and even looking at the human made rectangular pieces of wood converted into a house. All three of those things, spacious sky, green tree, constructed house, what is the common underlying nature of all of those things that are appearing to my mind this moment? I can verbally classify them, label them, separate them, differentiate them. But behind the appearance, there is a fundamental spaciousness in which they all abide. A spaciousness that has a potentiality that for which everything can appear. So I've been really trying to figure out how do I integrate that into daily life? And that's one of my practices that's been very deep in my mind. And then also a deep appreciation like for the interdependence. These leaves out my window are producing oxygen. Thank you. I'm breathing you in. I breathe out carbon dioxide. I give it to you. And then from the sky falls water and other nutrients that the trees need, right? And then from the down below the crust of the earth comes up phosphorus and nitrogen that the trees need to exist. So there's this massive interdependence. And when I walk in the forest, I do mycelium meditation. I
Mm.
visualize what I cannot see directly. under the ground, this vast, beautiful filament network from every tree, bush, plant, communicating to each other, feeding each other, sensing each other, sensitizing to each other. And I actually make that a practice and see how
Wow,
much
beautiful.
Philippe dissolves away.
And like you said too at the beginning, that it's a lifelong practice. That
It
even
is.
still now, you've practiced so much, you've done so much, and you're still practicing. I think that's an
Totally.
inspiration for
And
us to take.
not the goal for me is not to just do the meditation practice for for its own sake, but to arrive at a place like, because these are tools and methods to open up different parts of the heart, body, mind, soul, to open it in a sustainable way, right? To not get caught up in the meditation, but to get to recognize it's a doorway into, hopefully, opening something that fundamentally changes my relationship to everything. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. It's been super wonderful to have you here. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy life and schedule, and super fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider supporting the show at patreon.com/a curious yogi podcast. And please leave a review. It really helps the show reach more people. Let's stay curious, connected, and keep walking the path together. In total delight, this is Bobby signing off until next time.